The morning that 10 buses showed up at my driveway, I was feeding the goats and thinking about nothing more complicated than which fence post needed mending next. And then I saw a ribbon of diesel and people, and for a second my brain just sat down. They poured out under a banner as loud as a carnival sign, and at the center of it all was Darlene Price in a neon blazer like she'd swallowed a spotlight. I'll tell you right now, I didn't expect a showdown. I expected a neighborly complaint here or a letter, but what walked onto my land that day was a performance, staged and ticketed, and it was meant to make me the villain. My name's Eli Mercer, I run Red Creek Ranch, and I like my mornings quiet. I like the way the gate sounds, the small metallic thunk that says everything's in its place. That sound is the short prayer I say to myself every dawn. But Darlene had other plans. She'd been on the HOA board a while, real polished speeches, blog posts, a smile that was practical as a wrench. Trouble started small, a note on the mailbox about aesthetic improvements, a formal request to trim a tree, a fine for an unauthorized structure, her little taps on the horn. People in town called it civic duty. I called it someone finding taste police. Still, I tried to be reasonable. I wrote emails, I offered to meet. She answered with memos and a firmness that felt less about rules and more about show. So when her buses arrived, it wasn't an accident. It was a rally. Darlene wanted an audience, and she wanted me to flinch. She wanted me to be the angry rancher, the poster child for whatever story she wanted to tell her followers. Only problem, I had spent a long time learning a kind of patience that's not weakness but readiness. I knew my deeds, I knew my fence lines, and I knew the number on the deed was the same number in the county files. I also had, quietly, set up cameras where it mattered and a lock on the gate that obeyed my thumb on a phone. It's funny what a simple button can do to a crowd's confidence. They spilled into the pasture with chairs and picnics like a flash mob that lost its way, and Darlene grabbed a megaphone the size of a small cannon and started to talk. Her voice was that inevitable public service kind, friendly until you realized it meant business. Community fair, she said. Open house, reclaiming shared land. The irony was thick enough to slice. She had maps with boundaries that looked like they were drawn by optimism and wishful thinking, and people nodded like they were seeing scripture. Cameras pointed at me, phone screens hungry for the scowl they thought I'd wear. I could have put on a show, stormed out, shouted a curse, made a scene, but I didn't. I walked to the gate, thumbed my phone, and the gate clicked shut. Silence does strange things. It makes the small sounds louder, the coughs and the rustle of paper, the low murmur of confusion. Darlene kept talking because the script required noise, but the megaphone carried a brittle edge now, the kind of thing you hear when a speech collides with reality. People began to look at the paper maps again, and someone at the back, a woman with a county badge on a chain, squinted like she'd just tasted something off. That's when the sheriff's truck pulled up, because someone had called. I had not called anyone. I wanted to see what would happen if the law and a pile of truth showed up at the same time. Sheriff Marcus was the kind of man whose voice cuts through a field like a path through brush. He didn't raise his voice. He asked one clear question. Do you have a permit to hold this event on Mr. Mercer's property? Darlene blinked like she'd been surprised by a mirror. She had no permit. She had a plan and a press release. The sheriff asked for the deed. I handed him the county paper with my name on it, a plain, dull rectangle that felt like the most honest thing in the world. He read. He nodded, and then he asked the question that made every camera swing to frame Darlene. Who authorized these boundaries? Silence. Then a scatter of excuses, old minutes, a misfiled memo, the kind of administrative fog that can be summoned to hide a motive. That's when the angriest moment happened, not the moment of physical threat, but the moment where someone's small cruelty becomes visible. Darlene lost her cool. She stepped in front of a camera and her voice dropped the public civility. She had sharp words for me. Personal things clipped with the sort of hatred that's been honed on evenings of gossip and committee dinners. At one point, she even threatened to make life uncomfortable if I didn't cede. That was the phrase everyone knows means, I have power and I'll use it. A man in the crowd, not from my land, just a hothead, pulled a knife from his belt and waved it like a bad actor on a cheap stage. The knife was small and stupid, mostly for show, but the sound of metal under a hot sky is a different sort of language. It made people angry, it made people afraid, and it made the sheriff move. He disarmed the man with words and firm hands. He told everyone they were trespassing and, if they didn't leave, he'd have to take more formal steps. The buses started. People climbed back in with their picnic blankets and their righteous smiles, but without the bravado. Darlene stood there, neon blazer wilting like something left in the sun. I watched her for a long second, not triumphantly, just honestly, and realized how much of her life was riding on being the star of a story that wasn't hers. After the buses left, after the diesel smell faded and the banner sagged on the fence, the aftermath set in like dew. The sheriff said he'd file a report. The county clerk took photos of the phony map, and people who hadn't been certain before were suddenly asking questions. That's the thing about public spectacles. They either ricochet or implode, and the truth is one of those two outcomes. For Darlene, it was implosion. The HOA board, which had been comfortable letting her lead from the front for months, started to shuffle and whisper. A few weeks later, they asked for her resignation, a messy, lawyer-centered conversation that was less about laws and more about optics. Legally, nothing dramatic happened overnight. There were letters, there were cease and desist threats on both sides, and a private lawyer who smelled like old books helped me draft responses that were calm and explicit. You don't win a land fight by yelling. You win it by showing up with documents and a steady voice. I collected videos, I printed county records, I walked with the sheriff when he needed a statement. The whole town saw the footage on 100 small screens, and people started to choose sides. That's when you see what things are really about. It isn't the gate or the trees, it's who gets to write the rules and who gets to be afraid. There was a night a couple of months later when Darlene came by my mailbox and left something of folded paper, polite as a snake. She wanted to meet, she said. She wanted to clear the air. I nearly burned the paper on my porch, honest to God. Instead, I invited her to the front porch, because confrontation in the light is less dangerous than the same thing in the dark. She showed up in a different blazer, softer this time, like she was trying on being human instead of starched authority. We sat and drank coffee like two neighbors trying to remember how to be neighbors. She didn't apologize outright. She spoke in clauses and explanations. But there was a moment brief, like the silence before a bell tolls, where she looked at the pasture and said, "I thought I was doing what was best for the community." That was the most honest moment she offered. Someone who believed she was right, loud enough to drown out anyone who disagreed. I told her I believed in rules with reasons behind them, and I told her I'd protect what mattered to me, not out of spite, but because it was mine. We found no peace that day, but we found a limit. The county reasserted the property lines with paperwork and an inspection. The HOA revised some bylaws and, for better or worse, restructured the board so no single person got to turn a community meeting into a circus. People still talked about the Red Creek spectacle for a while, because humans like stories where the underdog is steady and the loudest voice is shown to be brittle. And tired because it's hard to carry the memory of someone trying to take your life's small order and reshape it into their headline. But the goats eat, the fence stands, and the gate still makes that polite little thunk in the morning. If there's a moral, and I hate morals shoved at the end like a curtain call, it's this. Power looks tidy on a stage, but messy in the hands of a single person. Community is nothing without checks, and honesty is stronger than a megaphone. Also, if someone brings 10 buses to your yard, you don't have to meet them with a yell. Sometimes you meet them with a deed and a calm thumb. Now I want to hear from you. Where do you draw the line between community oversight and personal rights?